Welcome to our program, Astronomy for Everyone. For our show today, we're going to talk about the constellations and star lore of fall. With me here in the studio is John Schroer, member of our cast and of the Ford Amateur Astronomy Club. John, welcome back to the program.
It's nice to be here, Don. Thank you.
You're welcome. As I said, we're going to talk about the seasonal constellations. As we know, the constellations change throughout the year as we look towards the south, and now fall is the time of year, and tell our viewers about those constellations.
All right, we start in the south. The first constellation you'll be able to see is due south, and it will look like a giant smile made of stars. It's the constellation Capricorn. Now I want you to try and imagine you're looking at a creature which the front half is like a goat, but from the waist back it looks like a fish. It has the tail of a fish. It's one of the oddest of the 88 constellations in the sky. It doesn't have any individual bright stars, but together you can see that it looks like the Cheshire Cat smile as it vanishes in the story Alice in Wonderland.
I've noticed that it does have sort of a triangular shape, a right triangle shape, roughly speaking, and it is a very odd constellation. Which one's next, John?
Okay, next to that, we're going to move over and talk about Aquarius, the water bearer. Now, this is a famous zodiac sign of the constellations that they use in the horoscope. But for astronomers, it's not that exciting a constellation. It has no bright stars, and it is a picture of a man carrying water in a large jug.
I have to admit that when I observe that part of the sky, I have a hard time picking that constellation out.
Now, the only thing that I can think of that you can look at in Aquarius will actually be the bright planet Jupiter. It is located in Aquarius during October.
Okay, well that would be the bright object then that they would see, not to confuse it with a star.
That's correct.
And what's the last constellation of our fall season?
Well, as we keep continuing moving from south to the east, the next one is going to be Pisces. Now, Pisces is actually two fish that are tied together by a rope. Again, there are no bright stars. You'll be able to see it as a couple of loops that are tied together by a triangle rope shape.
Okay, so they'll see sort of a V shape coming down from two circle shapes as well.
That's right, at the top of the V. Absolutely correct.
Now, as we're talking about these, we're talking about a sea goat, we're talking about a water bear, and we're talking about two fish. I can't help but notice the water connotation to all three of those constellations.
Yeah, the Babylonians, who set up most of the constellations in early civilization, during that time of year they experienced the wet season when the weather cooled and they got lots of rain. So they decided to place constellations that have the theme of water in them for that particular time of the year. And that's why I ended up with the fish and the sea goat and the water bear.
So these are the constellations then that'll be prominent in our sky beginning with late September, October, November, and well, even into December, correct?
That's correct. At least that's the ones that start off the fall.
And if they were to stay up late enough, they might get a preview of winter constellations, yes?
That's correct. Now, if we continue the story of the constellations, fall is a story about an entire family. It features Cassiopeia, the beautiful queen. She looks like a lazy W, and she is one of those constant constellations you can see in the northern sky. Next to her is her daughter, the beautiful Princess Andromeda, and she looks like a slightly bent letter V. There is also Pegasus, the flying horse, and he looks like a giant square in the sky. In fact, it's also known to amateur astronomers as the Great Square of Pegasus. In one of the stories I use in the planetarium, I've had people look at it and perceive that it's actually a baseball diamond in the sky, with the four major stars representing home plate, first, second, and third. Near the middle of the square, you can see the pitcher, near the pitcher mound, the catcher behind the plate, and you'll see a couple of bright stars off the side, and the story goes that's the batter filing a complaint with the umpire that there are too many outfielders in the field.
And that
So
would
that's
be,
like a
of course,
baseball game in the sky, and of
right,
course it's the
all-star outfield.
That's correct.
So what's the story we were talking about? Perseus and Andromeda, Cassiopeia, and of course her husband, King Cepheus of Ethiopia. What's the story?
Well, the story goes that a long time ago, Cassiopeia had Andromeda, and Cassiopeia was a very beautiful woman, and she knew it. And she was also very proud of the beauty of her daughter, Andromeda. The story goes that she once said that her daughter and herself, the queen, were more beautiful than a group of goddesses known as the water nymphs. This is a group of young goddesses that were the daughters of Poseidon, the god of the sea. Well, this offended the goddesses, and they went to complain to their father, who got very angry at these mortals and their pride. And so he decided to punish the kingdom of Ethiopia by sending a horrible sea monster, the constellation Cetus. Now, as Cetus began to destroy the coast, the king began to wonder, well, why are we being attacked by this monster? Where did this monster come from? They had never heard of such a creature before. So he traveled to the temple of Delphi to visit the oracle. And this was a person that knew everything that was going on in the classical Greek world. And so he told Cepheus that his wife had boasted, had angered the water deities, the sea goddesses, and that they complained to their father, and Poseidon had sent the monster to destroy the kingdom. The only cure, the only way they could save the kingdom, was to sacrifice Andromeda to the sea monster. After talking to his daughter, Andromeda agreed that we had to do something for the citizens of their kingdom. So she was taken to the nearest shore, tied to some rocks, and she was there waiting to be sacrificed to the sea monster. Now, before the monster actually arrived, what happened was that Perseus, who was one of the many sons of Zeus, who had many relationships with mortal women on earth, had a son, Perseus. And he was very greatly favored by Zeus and given many gifts. So he went out to challenge his own courage by killing Medusa.
This was the woman who had the hair of snakes?
And the lower body of a snake. And if you looked to her eyes just once, you were?
Turned to stone.
That's correct. So by using the shield as a mirror and the sword given to him by his father, he killed Medusa by decapitating her. And he was flying back home to show off and show how brave he was in defeating Medusa. And he saw this beautiful princess tied to the seashore by chains and wondered what was going on. So at first he flew down and talked to Andromeda. Andromeda didn't want to mess anything up for her parents, so she refused to talk to this handsome young hero. But eventually she really didn't like the idea of being eaten by a sea monster, so she told Perseus the entire story. He flew back to her parents, got permission to save her. Marrying some Greek hero was a lot better off than having her daughter sacrificed to a sea monster. So using Pegasus, he flew back to the seashore, and then he defeated Cetus by using the head of Medusa. Her eyes opened one last time, and the monster was turned to stone, sank beneath the waves. He freed the princess, and the kingdom and the princess were saved.
This seems to be a common theme in Greek mythology, the hero and the damsel in distress.
That's correct. It's also another very big example of how the Greek gods were not very nice sometimes.
Very fickle.
Now, Zeus was very proud of his son, and he forbade Poseidon for giving any other trouble to this kingdom. In fact, he was so proud of everybody, except for Cassiopeia, that he placed them all up in the night sky as constellations.
And I understand that this is really the only Greek myth that is so fully told in the constellations of the night sky.
That's correct. In fact, it is the only family in the nighttime sky. And it's not a Greek family. It's an African family. This whole family resided in Ethiopia on the northeastern coast.
And Perseus was the hero from Greece.
That's correct.
Very interesting, John. Very interesting. We mentioned Pegasus a little bit ago. That was the winged horse that...
That's correct. Andromeda, the beautiful princess, who looks like a long, stretched out and slightly bent letter V. There is also Cepheus. He looks like the Pentagon. He is a five-sided figure.
Kind of reminds me of the houses I used to draw when I was in third grade.
Yeah,
actually.
Absolutely correct.
And of course, Perseus is just below Cassiopeia.
Right underneath his mother-in-law. That's correct. He looks like an upside-down letter Y.
Very good. Well, this has been some interesting stories that we've been able to relate to you about some of the lore of the constellation, help you understand the night sky a bit more. If you have any questions or interest, visit our website. We try to have up-to-date information there that ties in with our programs. And right after this public service announcement, we'll be right back with our discussion of constellations and star lore for fall. Stay
While you
tuned.
might not be able to do anything about the price of gasoline, there are ways to steer your car toward better gas mileage. These include 1. Drive gently. Reduce your braking and quick acceleration. Since cars use the least amount of gas when they maintain a reasonable speed, use cruise control whenever possible. 2. Lighten up. The heavier the car, the more gas it uses, so remove all extra weight from your car that you do not absolutely need. 3. Minimize air conditioning use. When possible, close the windows and use the vents to bring in outside air. 4. Combine errands into one trip. It may sound simple, but think of the miles you could save by stopping by the store on the way home from work instead of heading back out. 5. Carpool. If you and a coworker trade off on who drives which day or week, you can both save gas and money. And 6. Keep your car in good repair. That means keeping tires inflated properly and changing your air filter regularly.
Welcome back to our program. In the first part, we were talking about the star lore and history of the constellations of the fall sky. Now we're going to turn to some of the brighter stars that you can see within these constellations. John, where do you want to begin?
Well, we'll start with probably the easiest constellation to find in the fall, and that's going to be Pegasus the Flying Horse. As we discussed about earlier, it looks like a giant square. Pegasus is the flying horse, the friend of Perseus. It also has, I think, one of the more enjoyable names, the baseball field up in the sky, especially for Tiger fans.
Well, here we have the constellation up on the screen, so tell us about some of those stars.
All right. We'll start off in the upper left corner on your screen. You'll see the star Syrah. Astronomers also call this Alpheratz, and it actually doesn't belong to Pegasus itself. It's included in the Great Square, but it's the crown jewel of Andromeda the Princess. Now, if you look to the lower right of the square, that's supposed to represent the head of the horse. And then the bottom line of the square is the location of the wings. The upper right are the two front legs. The constellation is always drawn with half of the horse, since you wouldn't want the back end of the horse sitting on the head of a princess.
Wouldn't be such a good idea.
That's correct. Very rude as well. We'll go ahead and move on to a constellation connected with Pegasus the Flying Horse, and that will be Andromeda the Princess. Now, in most maps, she is drawn as a single, slightly curving line. If you look at all the stars, you will see it looks rather like a very tall, thin, and slightly bent letter V. The bright star connected to the Great Square, that is the crown jewel. And you go down 2 stars to the next brightest star in Andromeda, you'll see there's another star slightly above it. And these are the belt stars, where she wore her golden belt. And then further on down the line, you wind up with the legs and her feet. Now, the next constellation we'll talk about is her boyfriend and her hero, and that's going to be Perseus, the hero, one of the many sons of Zeus. And Perseus looks like a long, slightly twisted letter Y.
Also looks to be upside down as well.
And it's also upside down,
yes.
Correct. It has 2 bright stars of interest. The top one, at the point where the Y splits off, is called Merfac. That's the brightest star of the constellation. If you look to the lower right, you'll take a look and see Algol. Now, this is known to many astronomers as the demon star. The Greeks were kind of terrorized by this star because, unlike most stars which twinkle, this star appeared to wink at you every 3.26 days. And they just thought that just totally freaked them out. It was the actual Islamic astronomers that named it Al-Ghul, the demon, which has then been changed over the centuries to Algol. Now, for those people who are of a conservative bent, I want to remind you we call it Algol, not Al Gore.
Thank you for that update, John.
Oh, you're most certainly welcome.
Now, aren't a lot of the star names, though you mentioned the Arabic astronomers, a lot of the star names do seem to be Arabic in origin.
And they've been changed since the 600s. The Greeks only named approximately 40 of the brightest stars. The Romans didn't care to add on to that, and that's the way it was for centuries. When Islam took hold in the Middle East, they began to gather knowledge, including the ancient knowledge of the Greeks, Egyptians, Babylonians, whatever they could find. And they discovered a lot of stars didn't have names, so they began to name them. When that knowledge was returned through Europe through the use of libraries and, of course, the occasional war where libraries were captured, that information came to Europe and eventually started the Renaissance and Europe waking up from its long slumber. Algol is an interesting because it's not a single star. I'm going to go back to that. It's actually a double star, a small, bright blue star orbiting a large, cool, red, or actually orange giant star. So when one goes behind the other, the overall brightness go down, and it appears to wink at you every 3¼ days.
So hence that ghoulish appearance to the ancients.
Yeah, stars that wink at you was never a good thing.
Now, there's one other bright star that is in the southern part of the sky at this time of the year.
That's correct, and that's going to be down by Aquarius, and that's going to be Fomalhaut, and that is the fall star. If you find Jupiter in the eastern sky, and it'll be pretty much east by southeast, if you look towards the south, you'll see a single star all by itself, and that'll be Fomalhaut. And it is all alone in that part of the sky.
Now, doesn't this star have some recent notoriety? Something was discovered with it?
That's correct. About a year or so ago, the Hubble Space Telescope detected a planet orbiting this star.
Interesting, interesting.
And they were actually able to image the planet and calculate its orbit around this particular star.
Is this the only planet they found so far?
Using Hubble, they found several other exo or extrasolar planets. The count is now approximately 515 planets orbiting other stars.
Now, we have stars out here. We also have some other deep sky interests. Can you tell us a bit about those?
Most certainly. We're going to return back to Andromeda, the princess, and I would like for you to look at the stars marking her belt. As you'll see in this image as it comes up, you'll see what appears to be a long oval that will appear as a smear of light in the part of the sky. You won't be able to see it by looking directly at it, but looking out of the corner of your eye, what astronomers call averted vision. And this is actually the most distant object you can see in the night sky. It's the Andromeda Galaxy. Here is an image of the Andromeda Galaxy and its two neighboring galaxies, M32, which you can see just above it, and NGC 205, a little dwarf galaxy you can see in the lower center of the screen. This is a galaxy that's about 2.2 million light years away. So when you're looking at this particular galaxy, you're seeing it as it was more than 2.2 million years ago.
So at these distances, light is really a time machine.
It most certainly is. The further you look back, the more distant, the older light you're looking at as it goes farther and farther. Now the thing is, the distance between the Andromeda and Milky Way galaxy is actually decreasing. We're on a collision course. So eventually the Milky Way and the Andromeda galaxy will become one very large elliptical galaxy.
Any timeline on this happening?
Most estimates aim at around 5 billion years in the future.
So we shouldn't sell the farm?
Well, not yet, no.
What are some other points of deep sky interest?
Well, another one, we're going to return to Perseus, the hero. And I'll direct you to the very top of the upside down Y, where you can see a couple of circles side by side. This is NGC 869 and NGC 884. This is the Perseus double cluster. This is two very large gatherings of stars that are side by side as we can see them from the Earth. In a pair of binoculars or in a wide field rich telescope, these are incredible things to look at.
And I've seen them myself. They look like diamonds on black velvet.
They are very beautiful. Now, as the night gets later on, we'll encourage you to look down to the horizon where you'll see a group of stars that looks like an extremely small Little Dipper. And this will be the Pleiades, or the Seven Sisters. It's a group of stars that are inside the constellation of Taurus the Bull, which means these stars are a warning that winter is approaching.
Now, the Pleiades do look like a small dipper, and some folks mistake the Pleiades for the Little Dipper. Actually, it's an open star cluster?
That's correct. You can see about 6 stars with the naked eye. There's more than 1,100 stars if you're able to use a much larger telescope or photograph it through a telescope using a CCD camera.
Very interesting indeed. And It's not really a constellation, but rather an asterism.
That's correct. It's a well-known picture among astronomers, and it's actually in the constellation of Taurus the Bull.
John, this has been a very interesting tour of our fall sky. If you'd like to ask us a question that we didn't bring up on this program, please send us an email at the email address you can see at the bottom of your screen. And right after this break, we'll be back with Term of the Month with Steve Whitty.
The term of the month is cosmological distance. I'm going to talk about the definition, and then I'm going to try to give you a feel for what cosmological distances are. The definition first. Cosmological distances are distances comparable to the distance that light travels over the age of the universe. Now, a couple months ago, we talked about astronomical distance, and we started off with something nearby, the town. We went to the city, the state, the country, the Earth. We went out to the moon. We went out to the sun. And then we made the big leap out to the nearest star, Proxima Centauri. And that's where we're going to start with this. At about 4 light years, and we're going to talk about light years. A light year is the distance that light travels in 1 year. So light travels around the Earth, if you had a light pipe like a fiber optic, maybe 7 or 8 times in 1 second. It's really fast. In 1 year, it goes trillions of miles, and in 4 of them, you could make it with your flashlight all the way from the Earth to Proxima Centauri, the nearest star, 4 light years. Now, the stars that you see in the nighttime sky, they're usually quite a bit farther. They're usually the very brightest stars, and they're anywhere from 8 light years to 3,000, maybe 3,500 light years. The center of the galaxy is maybe 27,000 light years from us, and the whole galaxy, the Milky Way, is about 100,000 light years from side to side. So that's 25,000 times farther than the nearest star. Now, the Milky Way is about 2.25 million light years from our nearest large galaxy neighbor. That's the Andromeda galaxy. So that's about 25 times farther than the distance across the Milky Way. This gives you kind of a sense of scale, a little bit, but it's a big jump, 25 times. The local group of galaxies is about 30 or so galaxies. This group of galaxies is maybe 12 million light years across. And then there are several groups of galaxies that form a long thread of galaxies, hundreds of millions of light years long. These threads are connected at hubs. Typically you have superclusters at the hubs, and the whole universe is this huge web, three-dimensional web of galaxy threads all the way out to the visible edge. And the visible edge is 13.75 billion light years away. And that is the cosmological distances. Anything in billions of light years is that far away. Cosmological distance.
Welcome to What's Up in the Night Sky for October 2010. We're going to start with the only planet that's visible in the sky, and that's going to be Jupiter. Back on September the 20th, Jupiter reached opposition, which means it was on the other side of the Earth from the Sun. It is visible in the southeastern sky in the constellation of Aquarius, the water bearer. On the 16th of October, you'll see it very close to the Moon, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Now, we can actually zoom up and show you Jupiter up close through an astronomical photo here. You can see the great red spot. which is a large hurricane-like storm, which is 3 times larger than the Earth. If you look to the lower left corner of Jupiter, you'll be able to see a dark spot. And there's actually a moon, which I'm thinking might be Europa, which is casting its shadow on the clouds of Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is drawing a lot of interest from astronomers because over the last 10 months, it's been hit twice by either asteroids or other space junk. So apparently, when comet Shoemaker-Levy 9 clobbered into Jupiter back in 1994, it wasn't the first nor the last time that Jupiter would take a hit from the minor objects of the solar system. Now move a little bit closer to Earth and talk about our upcoming phases of the moon for October. The new moon will appear on October the 7th, and then approximately 1 week later, we'll have the first quarter moon. The full moon will be on the 22nd, which will make it a Friday night, Saturday morning event, and then the last quarter moon will be on the 30th, 1 day before Halloween. Now, also coming up in our sky, there is a meteor shower, and it is known as the Orionids. To find it, you'll have to wait until after midnight and look for the constellation Orion the Hunter. You know, the guy with the belt. It will appear that meteors or shooting stars will come in all directions from Orion. It's not a particularly strong meteor shower. You'll see anywhere from 50 to 60 shooting stars an hour. Again, the further you are away from the city lights, the more shooting stars you'll be able to see in the nighttime sky. Now, meteor showers originate from comets. Think of them as pig pens of the solar system. When they get close to the sun, they melt, and as they melt, they leave behind a trail of small dust and rock particles. Now, there is a comet that will be visible to the nighttime sky in October. In fact, it'll be near Orion the Hunter. It'll start traveling through Perseus the Hero, then through Taurus the Bull, and then over to Orion. And this is Comet Hartley 2. It will appear about 4th or 5th magnitude, which will be a little bit brighter than the dimmer stars that you can see in the nighttime sky. We also don't want to forget, if you look over to the western sky in October, high in the sky, you'll be able to see the 3 bright stars, Vega, Deneb, and Altair, the bright stars of the summer triangle. And if you're far enough away from the city lights, if you look behind those stars, you'll see the softly glowing light of our galaxy, the Milky Way. So that concludes What's Up in the Night Sky for October 2010. So get out there and enjoy the sky. It's the best free show around.